You're listening to Permission to Shine, the podcast. Stories of overcoming obstacles and finding self-empowerment with Sherisse Bisram, Inner Power Activation Leader.
Hi everyone, I am very excited to introduce a guest to you today. Now, I've had the pleasure of being on this lovely guest podcast myself, so I know how exciting and wonderful she is, and also, the depth of experience, knowledge, wisdom that she has to share with you, I think is going to just go down in such a beautiful way. And she is international, which you will hear in her voice, which is lovely. So I'm really excited to introduce to you speaker and coach Tammy Vincent.
Well, thank you so much for having me here, Sherisse. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for anyone that doesn't know you, do you want to just give an overview of what you actually do now, and then we'll go backwards into your story as we go on?
Okay, well, right now I'm pretty much, if you had to call me some kind of speaker, I would like to say probably it's an empowerment speaker, because what I speak about is just that doesn't matter what happens in your past, it does not define you. You can step out and shine in your true light today, no matter what, starting now. And I try to reach the people that are just kind of stuck or, use life kind of their circumstances to kind of keep them down. So that's what I do. I talk about just how you were born amazing and you can be amazing again. And we just all need to get together to and realize that our past, no matter how bad it was, does not define us.
Couldn't agree more. And I would love for you to kind of give more context on that with telling us your story, because as we know, my listeners and obviously me and you, is that, it's lovely to talk about empowerment, but there has to be a journey, obviously, to get there. Otherwise, we can be born that way, but I feel like the resilience that it takes to become this deeply rooted, empowered, confident person is the story, right? So I'd love for you to share yours if you're happy to do so.
Oh, I am happy to do so because it does make sense. You don't have a testimony without a test, right?
Hmm.
So, both of my parents were alcoholics, and I grew up in a complete and utter confusing and dysfunctional household. So I didn't really have a role model to go to learn about relationships and healthy habits and boundaries or any of that. So when I started getting older, I mean, my boundaries were crossed so violently my whole life until I finally was getting ready to have my first child. And I realized, wow, I don't understand some of the big concepts of life. I don't understand unconditional love. I don't understand healthy relationships. I don't understand what it's like to even hold or hug a child. Like, I didn't know any of this. And so I kind of set out on this journey. And through the journey, I realized that when you grow up really beaten down, like your emotional, mental, physical state is so dictated for you. I realized that I was always told what to think, what to say, what to do, how to act. I didn't even realize who I was. And it wasn't until I was getting ready to have my first child that I realized I didn't want to be that person, because I didn't even know who that person was. And I didn't want to be that person for my children. I wanted to be someone confident that could stand up for themselves, that could have a loving relationship, that could love a child unconditionally. And so that is kind of where my journey, I guess you could say, set out to really heal everything that and undo and just really, come back to the original me. Like, I knew inside, I always knew I had this kind of innate belief that this is not the way life is. It just isn't. Like, I didn't see other families getting along and having fun and doing all this stuff, because the only people my parents hung out with were people that drank as well. So every situation I was ever in as a child, it was around alcohol, and just, I call it unreal fun. So even though it looked jovial and happy, there was a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of sadness underneath everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I resonate so deeply, as you know, because of, my parent being an alcoholic as well. And it's so, I love what you said there about that unreal fun. I think that that's such a key point, I think, to all of this, isn't it? And, in my experience, I've just seen how it's a vice, isn't it? Like alcoholism, I see it in overeating, I see it in all different ways, is that people are just trying to cope. But I think that fun element is such a paradoxical word almost, isn't it? Because it's like, we're trying to find joy in something, and by doing so, we're just actually making the problem worse. But people in those situations don't see it. But there's so much you said there that I feel like our listeners are going to just resonate deeply with. And the key point that I feel like I want to touch on first is the boundary part, because I think as women, we have just been shown time and time again that our boundaries are not as important, or that we should be of service to others, and therefore sometimes our needs aren't met. So I'd love to know kind of what the exact maybe tipping point was with the boundary that kind of triggered that for you, or if it was a series of people mistreating you, what was that?
Well, I really honestly didn't even understand boundaries. So literally, I know it sounds probably kind of harsh, but I didn't have any. Some
Mm,
people grow up with extra strict boundaries. I was literally given none. And I was just kind of thrown out there to figure it out on my own. But in that, people took advantage of me. I was
mm,
abused in every single way you could think of. And it never dawned on me that I could say, hey, whoa, back off. Like, that's not okay. I just
mm,
didn't know. So, and then I got to a point, honestly, where I was so numb, it just didn't even matter. So I remember when I was married the first time and we were out with friends and my husband said something to me and it was, I mean, at that point, it didn't even phase me as something hurtful. But my friend was with me and she said, people that love you don't talk to you like that. And I
mm.
was like, really? it didn't even phase me. And then I went home and I thought about it and I thought, yeah, that wasn't really nice. But I was so used to that. I was so used to if someone asked me to do something and I didn't want to do it, that they said, well, I'm telling you, you do it. And I was like, okay, cool. Like I was such a shell. And it wasn't that, but when my friend said that to me, I was like, you know what? You're right. And I started paying attention to the things people were doing to me. Like, and it was so small and subtle, but like at work, if I didn't want to, if somebody asked me, hey, can you work for me? And I'm like, no, I really don't want to. And they're like, no, you need to work for me. I was like, okay. So I never would stand up for myself. And when someone started pointing out to me that I really needed to do that, I didn't even understand what I really cared about. Like I was like, I don't care. I was like, it doesn't bother me to do these things for people because I didn't even know who I was. So I remember I had a really good friend and we sat down together and she said, Tammy, I want you to just imagine your most spectacular situation you could ever be in. Like, and I was like, okay, I'm at the beach with my friends. And she's like, okay, write down all the characteristics of that day. Like, what are you doing? What are the people like? What are you talking about? What are you not talking about? And just write down everything that gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling. And then she said, now picture a time in your life where you would have rather been anywhere else but there. She said, what are all the characteristics of that situation? And so I started writing them down. And she laid them down and she said, now this is your list and this is where you start being you. She said, if somebody does something and it's on the list of what you don't like, you're allowed to tell them no. You're allowed to stick up for yourself. You're allowed to say, I don't like that. If and if someone comes into your life and you notice these little things and they're all on that side, you don't have to date them, be with them, hang out with them, be their friend. You don't have to let them into your life because these are your values and this is who you are. And it was such an awakening. And I remember laying on the beach actually making this list with my friend. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, I'm going to try it. And it starts small. But when I started doing that, when people would be like, hey, I want to go there. And I'm like, no, I don't like that. It's no, all those people are obnoxious and rude. I'm like, I don't like that. And they would be like, okay, well, what do you want to do? And it was like, wow, like
Mm,
that was well taken. That was well received. I started realizing because I had never done that. Usually if I
yeah.
tried to assert myself, it was like, shut up, you're doing what we say. So I never really had the positive experience of setting a boundary and having it not come back at me.
Yes. Do you know what,
So
Tammy? That's such gold. Like what you've just shared there, I think that so many listeners, women, people that listen to this need to hear that in exactly how you've said it. Because my last episode was about values and how we align to our values. So you've just literally shown people in a literal way how you've been able to do that in your life and how it's absolutely transformed your life. And it's so funny that a lot of my clients come to me with that exact thing that you just said there. I don't know who I am. I don't know what my values are. And as your amazing friend, what a godsend she has been in your life, right? We all need friends like that. I hope that I'm that friend to my friends.
right.
Just to be able to show you how worthy you are, like what a beautiful stepping stone into the path that you're on. So please continue with your journey of how this all transformed your life.
Well, then it was, then as I started to gain a little confidence and I started to really and it was a while. I mean, obviously I was still a chronic people pleaser. I was all those things because that takes decades to get over. It's
Hmm.
so ingrained in you to be the caretaker for everybody else and not care for yourself. But again, in that, like what I started to do when people were like, well, I'm going to go here. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm like, but you guys go. I'm going to go do me. And so I would
Mm,
go and do something I enjoyed. I would go for a walk. I would take my kids to the beach. I would do something that for me. And then it was like all of a sudden, and I was going to therapy through this whole thing and trying different modalities and hypnotherapy. I was doing literally everything. So I was like, I'm going to figure this out if it kills me.
mm,
Um, but as I started to really start to step in and become me, I realized that I actually liked me. When I first started this journey, there was a lot of self-loathing. There was a lot of guilt and shame, and the shame was, I at that time was, it was my fault and I let all of this happen to me, and I have these boundaries now and I'm looking at them and I'm like, why would I do that? And then I went in and I did about 6 years of pretty intense inner child work
mm.
to undo all of that childhood stuff, to undo all of that programming, that underlying belief that you're just not worthy, that what
Yeah.
you, because you can still, even when I was setting boundaries in the beginning and it was feeling good, if I was come up to a situation and like the rubber met the road and, I had to make a split decision, it still was coming at me from that subconscious programming of what if they don't like me? And what if they don't want to be my friend because I set this boundary. There was still a lot of fear and shame and guilt and
Mm,
stuff in there. So I just continued on. I did a lot of work with people. I did a lot of journaling. The inner child work was absolutely beautiful that I did. And it's still showing up today. Um,
mm.
there's ways that somebody said to me on a podcast yesterday, and I loved what she said, is there is never a D on the word heal. It's never
Yeah.
healed because it's
Hmm.
a journey and it's an ongoing thing. And you
Absolutely.
never go, oh, there's the stop sign. When I get there, life is joyous
Hmm.
because inevitably life happens.
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't remember if my brain is kind of a little jumbled, but I had a stroke a month ago, and I it was an amazing experience. Obviously, I know that sounds absolutely crazy to say, but the night that after I had the stroke, my oldest son came to see me in the hospital, and the look he gave me flashed me right back to when I was 10 years old and my father had a heart attack and I wasn't allowed to go see him in the hospital. And I was scared to death that he was going to die and I was going to be left with my mother. Because even though they were both alcoholics, my mother was definitely the abuser, the manipulator, the narcissist. And I, until yes, or a month ago in the hospital, I never once processed my father's heart attack. And it was crazy. Like it was, so it's never ending. But now I have so many tools. I literally laid in the ICU and I was able to work through that literally by myself in a couple hours.
Mm. It's so
Just giving my
powerful.
little self that love I needed at that moment.
Yeah.
That when I was so scared and everybody told me to shut up, it's not about me. you
So
know?
yeah, and it's so important. And I think that when we're saying all of this as well, I just want to make it really clear to people listening that just because the healing journey is a lifetime thing doesn't mean it feels as heavy the whole
Oh
way
no.
through. And I think that I just want to add that in there because it I think when we say inner child work, that is like a massive door, like a trap door, and everyone's thinking, ah, I'm gonna fall down this hole and not get back out. But it's not that at all. It's like the weight that you've been carrying eases up over time. And like you said, when you're in the hospital going through that experience, you've already got all the tools in your
Mhm.
box there to just help you through that in the most easiest way. So what probably felt like a whole big boulder was actually probably only a small rock that fit in your hand that you're able to release and let it roll off because you've got the tools, as you said. But I remember when I came onto your podcast, I think that was a week after your stroke then. And it was,
Okay.
I remember you telling me, and I was like, wow, how have you managed to get back to it just so quickly? But then you was explaining to me about how much you love doing this. And then I was like, okay, I get where, this is almost quite healing and cathartic for you as well in doing your podcasts and stuff. But your life has been a series of like healing, learning, experiencing, growing, evolving, which has been so beautiful to hear. And equally, I've had my own version of that. But what really was that real pivotal moment for you where you did give yourself that permission to fully shine?
To fully shine was probably, you mean before when I started my journey of the healing, or when I really finally said, this is it, that I'm going.
This it
Um,
moment.
okay, the moment was probably when I was at a book writing conference. It was a Christian book writing conference. And I had always had in my heart, I want to help people. I want to be able to teach people what I learned, and I want to be able to do something. And we did something called the listening prayer. So there was like 120 people in the room. The pastor put on nice little music that he listens to. And he said, I want everybody to kneel down, and I just want you to listen. And I don't, and whatever comes to you, write it down, take notes, whatever you want to do. And when he came up, he looked around the room and he pointed right at me and another girl. And he started with me and he said, girl, I don't know what you got planned, but now is the time. And it
Mm.
was like my world filled with light. Like I was like, okay, I got this, you know? And I think that was the moment, because he didn't know me. He had never met me. But I'm like, okay, if God's talking to you too, he definitely is talking to me.
Oh, I
So I need
love
to start
that.
listening.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I think for in America as well, I think that religion plays such a big part in a lot of different cultures. I think in the UK, we don't have such a close connection with God as much as, you do in the US. But I think that connection to God, source, the universe, whatever it is, it's always speaking through us, isn't it? And I think
Mhm.
that, I always try and say to women, especially, that we are so closely connected to this because we have like life creation inside of us as well. So I love that you've shared that, because it really is that we are these magnificent beings that are constantly being spoken to. And I think that that moment that you gave yourself as the permission to shine was because, that's God telling you right then and there, like, come on, girl, like, this is it. Everything you've learned about you. And I was literally watching something a minute ago, which is very much our stories, why we do the work we do now. And it's that alchemy moment, isn't it, of saying,
Mm.
right, let's turn this pain into power. I didn't go through all of what I went through to not help and support other people in this space. So, yeah, talk to me a little bit more about kind of like what you do now with your clients, with your work. Like, what does that look like for you?
So I do, like I said, I do speaking for whoever needs me to speak to them, and conferences, workshops, whatever it is. And then I also do one-on-one coaching, and I do a group coaching program, and I have a couple online courses, and they're all kind of geared towards, like, my main focus course is called Trials to Triumph, and it's like an 8 week
Mm.
module work through, but it's all geared towards the steps that I went through. So it's like we talk about inner child work, we talk about, the subconscious mind and this conscious mind, and we talk about how to kind of rewire. So it's all of the healing that I went through, everything is. And in general, like, I can literally take anybody. I always say, if you're listening to these podcasts and things are resonating with you and you haven't resolved them, or you go, oh, that kind of hit me hard, those are the people we can help. Like you and
Yeah.
I, so I have people come to me that their parents might not have been alcoholics, but they might have been homeless for 6 months and lived on the streets and been abused and whatever it is. I try to take people's trials and turn them into their triumphs. And that's really where the
Mm.
course came from. So, yeah, like I said, I work with anybody on any level. I have people that are been with me for a week and just want one little thing. Let's work this one little thing out. And then I have people that buy a whole year package. So I custom tailor everything to everybody because everybody needs something different and everybody is at a different stage. And I want to meet you where you're at when you're ready for what you're ready for.
No, I love that. And I guess really what's coming up for me now is two things. One thing I want to ask you is because you went through having both a mum and a dad that are alcoholics, what has been your relationship dynamic like, as in meeting romantic partners? Because obviously sometimes we mirror, well, we do always mirror the relationships we saw growing up. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that for you.
So the first person I married was literally, and God love him, we're friends to this day. I have 2 children with him. I married him because he was the first person that told me he loved me,
Mm.
literally. And it was fun and it was exciting. And it lasted like about 5 years. There was infidelity. There was just, all kind of whatever. It was just a hot mess, but I wasn't ready to be married. I was 26 or 25 and just figuring myself out. But then my second marriage, who I'm married to still today, we've been married, I think,
Ah,
23 years. Um, that was different. It was more of a friendship. It was more of a, honestly, it was more of a, he was exactly the opposite of my first husband. And I knew I screwed that one up.
I love that.
But all of the things that, I don't know. It's a tricky thing. I know what I'm attracted to is fun, excitement, everything else, but I know what my stability level and my own issues. I need someone that kind of complements me and slows me down a little bit. And my husband is that exact thing. Like we're yin and yang. So we fit together very well. But I did, when I was just dating people, everybody I dated was horrible. Now that I look back at it,
Mm.
before I got married and even after I got married, they were all controlling. They were all just so manipulative and or they either that or they were very weak and I felt like I could fix them.
Yep.
And I found myself attracted to people that I was like, oh, he's worse off than me. I could fix him. And of course that didn't work either. So, but yes,
Mm.
you once I made that value list and like pulled that out like 20 years later, 15 years later, or whatever, or 5 years later, because I made it right when I married my first husband. And I realized that there was a lot of stuff on that value list. Oops.
No, I love
But
that.
yeah.
And I'd love to know kind of a little bit more into that because obviously you're saying now that your husband that you're with is obviously the stable, the grounded, the beautiful things that you need. How did you approach that when you met him and the integration? Because obviously the old thought processes stop us from accepting that ease, love, and safety because we haven't seen it. So what was that like for you?
It was very difficult to accept that. I remember I was running a daycare and he would show up with flowers or something and help me take care of the kids. And I was like, whoa, 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 that doesn't feel right. Or, a compliment for a long time didn't feel right. And I would immediately, and my dad helped me a lot with this because my dad was the first one that said to me, Tammy, you never saw a healthy relationship. You don't even know what it looks like. So when my husband would do something for me and I would be like, I don't need you to do that, my dad would pull me aside later and say, Tammy, you know what? A guy needs to be needed. Let him feel like you need him. Let him appreciate when people do things for you. They're doing it out of the generosity of their own heart. There is no ulterior motive. There's no agenda. He is just kind. And my dad's like, get used to it. And he
Mm.
really helped me through that. I probably wouldn't be married today if it wasn't for my father because he was the one, even though we never really talked about the alcoholism at all, he did try to steer me in the right direction. He's like, Tammy, our family struggled with money all our lives. That's not how it's supposed to be. Get around the right people. Be the person that you want to be. Like act like the person that you see in the future, not like the person that is still struggling. Like he was the one that gave me all those tips and tricks, and I love him for it. You know, he's passed now, but he literally saved my marriage because I didn't know how to handle that. He was the one that was like, you need to do that. It's okay. It's okay to feel needed and wanted. And so,
Oh, that's so beautiful to hear. I think that obviously my example of that was different. You know, like my dad passed away when I was 17 and I didn't get to have any of those pearls of wisdom really. You know, like there probably was
mm,
some fed in there, but I think the fact that you were able to get the best out of your dad too, as well as the worst, I think sounds
mhm,
like it was a real fulfilling moment. I feel like I've had to accept apologies I never got, and you know, things like that. And don't get me wrong, like I know that my dad had a big heart. He just didn't I guess he was just trapped in his own trauma too much to be
mhm,
able to showcase what I feel like I needed growing up. But I think the fact that you had your dad there to cheer you on still, even when things were hard, I think that that's such a sweetening to like the bittersweetness of the
mhm.
experiences that you had. So I'm really happy to hear that actually. I think that that's yeah, just wonderful. And really, I feel like I'm asking you those questions for my own reasons as well, because I feel like, you know, for me in relationships, it's definitely been something that I still work through now. And I'm finding that every time I heal deeper, I'm finding it easier to like, you know, welcome in these new people. And actually, everyone that I've met has been a mirror to a version of me at some point in my life. And it's just interesting because I believe that the next person I meet will probably be that one. But it's really nice to hear you say about how the qualities that you were looking for in your now husband were the things that you know you needed. So it's almost like we have to bypass our ego to say, oh, you want someone that looks like this or does this. It's like, actually, how does this person make me feel? And that's the key point there. But I know a lot of my listeners have been through similar things or are going through things in relationships and stuff. And I just wanted to add that in because I think it's so important. So thank you for sharing that so openly as well. And on that, because obviously me sharing what kind of like the things are that I'm working through still. I'd love to know like what is something in your journey through your childhood experiences or whatever it is that repeats for you. What is that thing that you find that that is always something to do around that kind of flares up for you?
I think if I had to pick something, it would be the people pleasing.
Mm,
And I've kind of resigned myself to the fact that if I say to my husband, hey, let's go get Chinese food, and he's like, no, I really want a steak. I'm like, okay, let's go get a steak. And everybody's like, wow, man, you give in so easy. And part of me is like, yeah, I guess I should have said, no, I really want Chinese food. But honestly, it doesn't matter to me. Like, you know what I'm saying? So, like, sometimes I'm like, well, maybe I'm just kind. Like, people, a good example is at work. I bump into people and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. And people are like, would you stop apologizing? I'm like, well, maybe my I'm sorry is just really an excuse me. And I'm a considerate person. And it bothers me that I bumped into you over and over again. You know, so it's like this. It's like I
mm,
know sometimes that I could stand up for myself more or get what I want. But then on the other hand, I question it at night. I'll sit down and be like, did it really matter where I ate? No, I didn't.
yeah.
Now, if I really wanted ice cream, like if I want ice cream and he's like, no, I really don't, I'm like, turn the car around. We're going to get ice cream. You know what I
Mm,
mean? So like when I need to, but I think that's the thing. I just it doesn't bother me as much or that I give in. I guess I could say I give in when it's like decisions. So I don't always go, no, I really want this, and people look at it as people pleasing, and sometimes I say yes, it is, but then again sometimes like it doesn't matter to me. So
mm,
but I think that's the thing if I had to pick something, because when a good example is I will stop something if my 29-year-old comes to me and says, hey, do you want to go to the casino, and I'm supposed to have something going on that day. I'll be like, hold on, let me see if I can change my plans. And people are like, why would you do that? Like, why would you change your plans? And I'm like, because in my heart of hearts, the memories of a day out with my son is more important than what, you know what I mean? So
absolutely.
I'm trying, I try to reach that balance. And, but I think that's the thing that sneaks up on me the most is
Mm,
I don't always reach that balance. I still will give in just to give in some. And And I always tell people, especially for the listeners out there, if you do something and it doesn't sit with you wrong, then it's not people pleasing. It's just doing whatever. It doesn't matter. But if you do something and it's at your expense, and then you're going to sit at home and be like, man, I really wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I had said this. That's people pleasing.
Yeah, I was about to say that as well, because I feel like the examples you gave to where you've kind of relaxed and things like that, I feel like that's just you being flexible. I
Right.
didn't see that as people pleasing at all. I was like, oh, you're just really flexible. And like you said, when it comes to bumping into people, like you said, it's your way of saying excuse me. Instead of saying excuse me, you're saying sorry. I think that's okay. And I'm really glad that you really define that for the listeners as well, because it doesn't have to be, we don't have to be so fixated on one or the other. It can be everything. And also, if you're just fancying going out for dinner and you thought you wanted Chinese food, but actually the idea of steaks, like, actually, I could eat a steak, it's almost like you're saying that, but with less words. So I absolutely get where you're at, in terms of that. But yeah, like you said, as long as you're not costing your own wants and needs in exchange for someone else's, that's really it, isn't it? And like you said, quality of time will always outweigh another appointment, or just doing things for the sake of it. So I completely resonate with what you said there, and I think that you gave, yeah, just a beautiful example on all of that. There's something more I wanted to say actually in regards to that. I think it's gone from my head, but I was thinking about this people pleasing concept. Oh, that was it. What is your star sign? Do you know?
I don't. I really don't. I
When's your birthday?
I'm a Virgo.
Oh, you are a Virgo.
I'm a Virgo, August
Yeah.
27th. So I don't
Oh,
know
okay.
much about astrology, and I really want to learn more because people are always like, "Oh, you this and that." And I have friends that know my whole human design chart, and they always tell me, "Oh, that's why you do this and that." I'm like, I don't know, I just am.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I wouldn't have put you down as a Virgo actually. I would have said more like a mutable sign because of that flexibility. But I'm wondering if Virgo's your sun sign, but then your moon and rising might be like Sagittarius, or something else along those lines, even a Pisces. That there's like this flexibility within you that allows you to ebb and flow, because Virgos can be quite fixated, but then that might show up in other ways, like your determination to heal, and the details of that might come up in the Virgo list. But I just wanted to ask that based on what you've said. But Virgo is ruled by Athena, so she's the goddess of war, but also um like she's strategy, she's that divine feminine. So there's probably a lot of that that feeds into you as a person in some form of a way. But our star sign, like I said, is connected to all different parts of us. So I just thought I'd ask that, because sometimes for me, when I ask people that question, it's so obvious that they're that sign, and I couldn't tell. I was thinking, oh, I wonder what your star sign is, because Geminis, for example, could be quite easily people pleasers because they could give everything they have. But then on the other side of that, they could also take everything you have. So it's just
Right.
interesting to just kind of pull that back round again. But yeah, I guess none of that is
Yeah,
really that.
we were actually at work the other day, and they were all talking about this, all the girls, and they said, "Well, when's your birthday, Tammy?" And I said, "August 27th." And they looked at me and they all went, "You're a Virgo?" Just like that. They were kind of like, "Okay, I don't see it, but okay. I guess it said the exact same thing as you." I was like,
Mm.
"Well, maybe I was meant to be born in September. I don't know. Like, I don't know."
Yeah, it's funny,
It's
isn't
funny.
it? And also,
Yeah.
I know a lot of Virgos that are business owners. So, maybe that's obviously the tying in. And I'm also August, I'm the 22nd. So I'm a Leo. And
Just made it.
yeah, but I don't have it. Like, people keep saying to me when I was younger, they were like, oh, you are on the cusp of Virgo. And I think as I've gotten older, I've definitely leaned more into Leo more than Virgo. It's just interesting. I mean, for me, like I said, I can normally tell straight away, and I couldn't with you. So I was like, oh, I'm going to ask you that question. But I guess if anyone's listening into your story and thinking, I'd love to know more about you and what you do, where could they find you?
Probably, honestly, it used to be my website, but honestly, the best place to find me is to go to my podcast. Go on Apple Podcasts, and it's Adult Child of Dysfunction, because in all of my show notes, I have my courses, I have my website, I have my links, I have everything in there. So that's probably the best. And then you can get to Insta, you can get anywhere you want from that main podcast platform.
Amazing. And I'll get you to send me that and we'll put it in the show notes. Then people listening can just click on it straight away, which would be amazing. And my podcast that I did with you will probably be on there soon as well, which is lovely. We can stay interconnected, which is great. I guess like I love to kind of round off the session with a soul to soul message. So based on maybe something you've shared or something you feel like right now in your heart is something that you know someone needs to hear, I'd love for you to share.
Okay. If I had to say anything, you were born divine, beautiful, and amazing. And even though you might not think it right now, it is true. And every single thing that you need to get back to that original you is all inside of you. So listen to podcasts, do whatever you got to do. But in all of that, look inside of you because that's where all the answers are. And you will find every single one of them to be the happiest version of yourself. I promise you. Take some work, but every step forward is another step forward towards where you're wanting to be. And you deserve it.
Absolutely that. Thank you so much, Tammy. And I couldn't agree more. It's been so lovely to hear your story in more detail. And thank you so much for sharing your vulnerability and honesty in all of this, because I think that it's the vulnerable stories that are the healing parts and it makes people feel seen and heard. And they might not have ever thought about their own journey in that way. So thank you for sharing your vulnerability. And yeah, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. For the listeners out there, you got this.
Yay, thank you.
If this episode resonated with you, please do like, follow, and share with someone that you know would benefit. If you're looking to dive in deeper to becoming your most unapologetic, most authentic, shining self, please do head to my website and join my newsletter where you'll find out about all of my upcoming events and speaking opportunities and all of the things that I have going on. And also, if you would like to work with me, please do drop me a DM on any of my socials or through my website. Love and light.